5th century BCE in Greece was a time of nationalistic loyalty. It was the start to superior thinking within the context of their culture. Monuments were being built and progressive thoughts were being shared, including the idea of the creation of democracy at the Acropolis, or more specifically, the Parthenon in Athens, Greece. Being an example of the extraordinary power of the Greeks, the Parthenon was built to show the glory of Greek culture over every other culture, as well as a place of worship for the goddess Athena. This astonishing monument has seen a lot of history since its birth in 432 BCE. It has seen a war with Persia where its leader, Xerxes, destroyed it 30 years after it being built. Among that destruction, it has been shot at, exploded, set on fire, rattled by earthquakes, converted into a Christian church as well as a mosque, and finally looted for its miraculous sculptures and art. A common debate among people in Greece, as well as around the world, begins with these exact sculpture and art pieces. To understand this concept fully, we must first define looting, which according to Merriam-Webster, looting is something held to resemble goods of value seized in war. Comparing this definition to cultural pragmatism, which is a philosophical movement or system having various forms but generally stressing practical consequences as constituting the essential criterion of determining meaning, truth, or value. Amongst these separate concepts emerged two parties, cultural nationalists and cultural internationalists. Cultural nationalists include people and communities that advocate for the protection of cultural property within the patrimony laws. Opposing this party is the cultural internationalist that supports the conception of the spread of international cultural knowledge. There are many supporters for cultural nationalists, including archaeologists, which urge for stricter measures regarding international exchange of artifacts. According to the Society for American Archaeology's 1996 Principle of Ethics reads, whenever possible, archaeologists should discourage and should themselves avoid activities that enhance the commercial value of archaeological objects, especially in public institutions or readily available for scientific study, public interpretation, or display. An example of the cultural nationalist perspective is shown in the petition to return specific sculptures that were originally scattered around the architecture of the Parthenon. This is an example because the Parthenon was the origin of these sculptures, and they are currently not housed in their origin. The argument against nationalists is such that they limit public education, and the internationalists have the ability to correctly broaden understanding of human history to a larger audience. Supporters of the cultural internationalists include universal museums, which have the preposition to serve not just the citizens of one specific nation, but the citizens of every possible nation. Yet this policy cannot be completely regulated, because these universal museums are usually in the western part of the world, which the majority of the people they are trying to reach do not actually have immediate access to. A huge moral aspect of this argument between cultural nationalists and cultural internationalists is the Elgin marbles, originally from the Parthenon in Athens. These marble sculptures are named the Elgin marbles specifically because of who took them from their original location, Lord Elgin or Thomas Bruce. Initially, Lord Elgin wanted to emulate the sculptures of the Parthenon for the arts of Great Britain through making molds, casts, and drawings of these art pieces. While working in Athens, he was granted a letter of instruction allowing him to have full power over the worksite and authorizing his workers to take away any pieces of stone with inscription or figures. Still in present-day Great Britain, the now named Elgin marbles are placed in the British Museum for most people to see. The mission statement for the museum reads as, "We seek to illuminate the histories of culture for the benefit of present and future generations." This is a statement for most universal museums, as which the British Museum regards themselves as. The characteristic ideal of British identity encompasses liberty and freedom since the mid-18th century until now. Cultural internationalists believe that a connection that can be made from Great Britain to Greece are those exact characteristics. Yet another character that is shown from the custody of the Elgin marbles is the force to accumulate possessions. An aspect of the argument benefiting the cultural internationalist perspective is that Greece has not had an adequate site to preserve these sculptures. This allows their possession of the marbles to become a legitimate ownership. The start to this opposing legitimacy began in 1976, when Greece actively initiated a project for the Acropolis Museum. The first architectural design was specifically limited to participants of Greece. Both the first and the second architectural design were rejected based on the construction layout and were said to be deemed unsuitable. The third architectural design for the Acropolis Museum was in 1989 and was announced to be international, similar to a universal museum. Yet this design was halted owing to the fact that the site location contained sensitive archaeological remains. The final architectural layout started later in 2007. With this design, the location changed to an area opposite the Theater of Dionysus in Athens, Greece. The museum was built on public land and only needed a limited number of expropriations within the area. The permanent placing of the Acropolis Museum was built on structured pillars that span the central bedrock and hover on roller bearings, which can endure Richter scale magnitude 10 earthquakes. The official museum was opened in 2009. Currently, the Acropolis Museum holds art pieces, including the original Caryatids, portions of the Parthenon frieze, and the relief of Nike adjusting her sandal, among other important components of the Parthenon, originally at the Acropolis in Athens. Through this discussion comparing cultural pragmatism and looting, and more specifically cultural nationalists and cultural internationalists, there is a direct line to the location of the Elgin marbles and whether they should be housed in the British Museum or returned back to the Acropolis Museum.